We howl, and our howl echoes Gaia's lament. Our world, our mother, lies dying, and her murderers dance across what remains of her body, digging deeply of her wounds to forge the icons that signify to other hierophants the excess of their glee. We howl, our song stroking our fury. We howl, our packs taking the war form, biting, tearing, killing as Gaia bid us do. But our subjugators are myriad. Those who take from the world to foster their own greed. Those who take from the world so they can accumulate more. The better to keep taking and taking in the nights to come, until Gaia's bones have been picked clean. We howl, our dances around the fires stroking our fury. We howl in each other's presence to signal to our undiscovered kin and to call to others of our kind across tribe and moon sign. We must put aside our differences, turning the killing urge against those who paint the mark of the worm upon themselves and not against each other. We howl, our memories of our lost and our fallen and our spirit sick betrayers stroking our fury. We howl, wondering, questioning, doubting, if stoking our fury can revive our dying mother, or if our fury is but a paean to vengeance, an empty, anguished, monstrous roar at the end of the world. Do you howl with us? And against whom? Who stokes your fury? When will you rage? Hey everyone, thus is the opening to Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition by Renegade Game Studios in conjunction with Paradox Entertainment. Today we're talking about this game because I just decided that it's going to be Werewolf for now. So this is the new one. It just came out and I haven't been able to talk about it up till now. So here we are. I guess it's been out for a little bit. It's been out for about a year now, I guess. So when I say just came out, I mean a year ago-ish. It came out right before I moved, so I got caught up with all of the process of moving, so I haven't been able to talk about it. But here we are. Today we're going to talk about it. And so let me pop open my notes so I can talk to you about it. So by its own description, Werewolf the Apocalypse 5th edition is the most spiritual game out of all of the World of Darkness games, and it is the one most tied to environmental politics. Obviously, if you couldn't tell by that little opening, there's a whole lot about the earth and the environment that goes into the game. It's a game that focuses on real-world horrors like capitalist exploitation, sexual predation, extremist politics, substance abuse, and all other kinds of cruel things that monsters do, especially the human ones, and what they would do to themselves and to other people. And that makes sense considering that werewolves are essentially Gaia's response to all of this. Gaia and Luna, her sister, and their response to all of this sort of short-term greed and the corruption that comes with it, in particular to how it affects the balance of the momentous natural forces that affect everything that ever was and ever will be, which are the triad, which is the worm, the wild, and the weaver. And so that's sort of, Gaia doesn't fit into that because Gaia is sort of there. Those are just momentous, like, cosmic forces that are at play. And werewolves are the walkers between two worlds. They are part beast, part man, and they are part physical, part spiritual, right? So they're sort of uniquely set up to deal with the moral corruption that goes along that affects both the physical world and the spiritual world of Gaia, right? So they sort of straddle that plane. So the theme of Werewolf the Apocalypse, as indicated by the book, so Werewolf the Apocalypse is aptly named because it focuses on the apocalypse, where we essentially are living in a world that's just about over. The forces of entropy are pretty much won. Greed is a virtue, war is rampant, and consumption is liberation, right? Going shopping is like how you like deal with stuff, like, what is it? Retail therapy. The world is essentially in its death throes and is barely a husk on the verge of extinction. The werewolves are not harbingers of the apocalypse, but they're Gaia's guardians trying to avert the apocalypse at every opportunity that they can to try to prolong life as long as possible. Just prolong it as long as possible. But the theme of the book is called, it says it's gothic punk, which is the same way that they described Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition. In fact, there's quite a bit in like the early stages of the book that seems to be copied and pasted right out of the Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition book, which which sort of makes sense because it's the same system, right? H5 and V5 are the same system, and W5, which is what this is, Werewolf 5th edition, follows that same system as V5 and H5. So that kind of makes sense. But there's some key differences. So like in Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition, the hunters focus on the evil cabals of monsters that sort of rule the world and sort of run in the darkness, right? The evil monsters that exist. Whereas Werewolf focuses on the spiritual and emotional corruption that's caused by those monsters, but also even just people. So yeah, this is more focused on the emotional and spiritual corruption that is occurring rather than the monsters themselves. And another key difference is that this book involves, like Werewolf as a whole, involves the Umbra. So it's one of the key differences between Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition and so Werewolf, or even Vampire and Werewolf, is that Vampire the Masquerade and Hunter the Reckoning, they focus kind of on like the physical plane and everything going on in it, whereas Werewolf has this other layer, this spiritual world that is just outside of the material. So they're holy material, and Werewolf has that added layer. So the Umbra is essentially the dark mirror of the physical plane, and it's sort of where emotional schisms may exist. Like something in the real world might look like a mine, and in the Umbra, it's like a scar, a fissure torn into the fabric of the shadow of the spirit world that is the earth, right? So it's kind of this reflection that is even more apocalyptic and barren than the physical world. It's just sort of really messed up. It's violent. But it's also where werewolves pull their spiritual power, where like their sort of sacred spaces gain energy. So it's kind of like a weird, kind of cool double-edged sword going on. But involving the Umbra in any of the World of Darkness games kind of definitely makes it different. It definitely makes it different from Hunter the Reckoning and from Vampire, because it allows storytellers to pull in these sort of more mind-bending supernatural horrors, and like a whole new level of antagonists and things. Like drug addiction is a thing, and you might see a character, like a drug addicted character, NPC in Vampire or Hunter, but in the Werewolf game, that drug addicted character might actually be possessed by some form of low level spirit that's causing them to continue to be addicted or something, and that addiction may actually be set up by an evil corporation that's trying to make profits, where those things would not be seen by the hunters or the vampires, maybe if they dug a lot, but they probably don't care. And even if they do, okay, corporate greed, cool, whatever. To werewolves, that's a big problem. Corporate greed leads to bigger things. But then the spiritual side of like they're infecting people with these kind of formorti or these banes or whatever, that's a big deal. And the werewolves have to deal with that. So pretty cool level of difference between those games and this one. So let's talk about the dice system. Let's talk about the system as a whole. So if you're unfamiliar with the World of Darkness systems and you haven't watched my videos on like Hunter or on Vampire, then cool, we'll just cover it now. But it uses the same system as the 5th edition games of the World of Darkness, the stuff by Renegade Game Studios and Paradox Entertainment, the newer stuff, as it were. Which is basically a system that's like attribute plus skill for like most things. Sometimes it might be attribute plus attribute, and sometimes it might be attribute plus some other thing like renown, or sometimes it might be skill plus renown, which is like a thing in this game. But essentially, you're going to make a dice pool of d10s based on those numbers. So if you have a 5 in resolve and or say intelligence and a 3 in occult, you're going to make a pool of 8 d10s and you're going to roll them, right? So that's what we're talking about. And just like in V5, W5, so Werewolf has this level of rage that occurs. So like the hunger dice in Vampire, you have rage dice here in Werewolf, where you're essentially going to take that pool. So you're going to build that pool of like 5 intelligence, 3 occult of 8. And let's say your character has a rage level of 3. 3 of those dice are going to be rage dice. You're going to want to replace them with something else to notify or indicate to you that they are rage dice, because they have slightly different interactions than the other ones, and I'll cover that in a minute. But this is the dice pool you're going to make, and you're going to roll it, and you're going to see if you succeed. Success is determined by any values that are 6 or above on those individual dice. You count those up. Anything below 6 just doesn't matter unless it's a rage die, which I'll cover in a second. But you sort of count all those successes up and you compare them to the difficulty of an action or an opposed roll. So like conflicts use opposed rolling, just straight up opposed rolling. I'll cover that right now. So straight up opposed rolling when you do a conflict thing, like you want to punch a guy and the guy wants to dodge it and get away, then you're going to roll your attack. You're going to roll your strength plus ball or something, and then they're going to roll their strength and athletics to get out of the way like that, and then you're going to look at the number of successes and just compare them. And that's how conflicts happen, and that's both physical and mental conflicts. Like you're having an argument with somebody, you're going to use like your manipulation plus persuasion or something to try to convince them of something, and they're going to use some thing to manipulate that. There's like composure plus whatever to oppose, and that's how you do conflicts. So a very simple system of d10s, right? You're just looking for a number of successes based on your die pool, and if you get a 10 on any of the dice, it doesn't equal like a critical success or anything, but if you get 2 10s, then you can bind those two, so there's just 1 success individually, but it becomes, when there's 2 of them, it becomes 4 because it doubles that number. So there'd be 2 successes individually, but they're doubling them, 4. If you get a third one, it doesn't do anything, but if you get a fourth one, it doubles then again. So then you'd have 8 out of those 4 dice, 8 successes. So that's how the system works. Yeah. So, and then there's the willpower option of like if some of the dice don't have, like if they're below 6, like they're 5 or below, you can, if you have up to 3 of them, you can re-roll by spending a willpower point. So you spend a willpower point, you get 3, you can re-roll 3 of those dice. And typically your action difficulties are going to be 2 or 3, but it depends. Maybe something you're doing is really difficult, or maybe there's a lot happening, and so the difficulty's gone up. That's up to your storyteller. All right, so the rage dice thing. So that's really the main difference between this system and Hunter or Vampire. It is very similar to Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition, though, where you will change some of the dice in your pool to EP rage dice. And the rage dice are essentially the same dice as before. 6 and above are successes. However, on the rage dice, a 1 and a 2 are considered failures. They're considered sort of critical failures. They actually kind of work as successes too, depending on what you're trying to do, depending on how you look at it. Because essentially what the dice will do if you roll a 1 or 2, if you have 2 or more of them, you get what's called a brutal critical or brutal response, a brutal outcome. So you essentially will kind of rage, right? So if you're doing something like you're trying to hack a computer and you have these rage dice come up with 2s, you have 2 2s or whatever from the rage dice, then perhaps the hacking, like it goes badly for you, and your response to it is to grab the computer and throw it out the window, or some other sort of ragey, like angry response, because you're a killing machine at your core, right? So that's how that works. You're going to have a range of rage from 0 to 5. Typically you're probably going to start at 1, depending on how you do. Like you really don't start at 0 unless you've done something to get it to 0. And there's some like rights and things that you can do to get it to 0. But you kind of want rage throughout the game. Like this is the thing that becomes apparent. So unlike Hunter or Vampire's hunger dice, where you don't want hunger, you want to avoid hunger as much as possible. In Werewolf, you kind of want rage, because you need rage to do some of your werewolf things. In order to do a lot of the werewolf things, you got to do a rage check, and so you need some rage to do that, because if you roll your rage check and it fails, i.e. it doesn't get a 6 or above, then your rage goes down. And if your rage goes down to 0, you can't accomplish whatever it is you're doing. So, like, for example, if you're in your Krynos form, the war form for Werewolf, you get like a +4 to all physical checks, a +4 to your health levels. You get to add, you get to have your claws will do an additional 3 damage of like superficial, I guess, but your bite will do 1 aggravated damage on top of whatever your margin is for success. And you can regenerate damage you've taken, but to regenerate, you have to make a rage check. To go into the form, you have to make a rage check. To go out of the form, you have to make a rage check. So these things require rage checks. Now, say you get hit in Chronicles form, you want to regenerate some of the damage. You make a rage check to reduce your health by 2 levels per sort of success. Then you will do that. But if you happen to fail on that roll, you lose those points. So if both of them are below 6, you lose 2 rage. And if you have 0 rage now, you change back into human form. Now, if you're in the middle of a fight with some werewolf or even just a vampire or a human, maybe a group of hunters, that sucks if you suddenly turn back into human form, because you are much, much easier to kill. So this game sort of wants you to have rage and be able to use it. So you want to continue to maintain rage rather than, get rid of it like you would in V5, like in the Hunger Dice in Vampire. So, but like I said, conflicts all kind of work the same, so I don't really need to cover that too much. But essentially, it's those opposed rolling. Like I said, damage is such that if you comparing the two pools in your opposed roll, you essentially will look at who had the most successes. That's the person that ultimately won, and the number of successes by which they won becomes the margin. So that just becomes the base damage. And then if they have any weapons or like the claws, for example, like the +3 claws, like I was saying, those get added in as the damage that you apply to the person, which goes to their health box, which then determines whether or not they take damage. The same thing goes for willpower, right? If you're doing a political or sort of social interaction, maybe it's a mental one. Maybe you're trying to kick a possession out, like a ghost or a spirit that's possessing a person. You want to kick them out. Same thing will happen. The damage goes to their willpower or whatever is determined for how that is. Like maybe it's corpus or something. I don't know. But it would go to that. That's how it works. Very simple. Realize I'm going fast, so I'll kind of slow down a little bit, but it's a very fun game. I'm very excited for it. That's why I'm talking so fast. But let me talk about character creation, because that's one thing that is different. The key notes to understand about my view of how this game kind of goes together is that I am not, I traditionally did not play earlier werewolf games. I'm not super familiar with them. I didn't play them. I don't have any ties to them. I never had a character with any kind of tribal lineage or clan lineage or pack lineage or whatever. So for me, looking at the character creation and looking at this world and how it all works was fine. I didn't care. There was nothing that stood out to me as a problem. But I will admit that my friends who have a legacy with Werewolf, including my friend Legacy, they did have some, I don't know about Legacy's personal opinion, but anyway, they did have some issues with the choices that were made for design of this version of Werewolf. Some clans or tribes that they felt should have been included, some descriptions of tribes that they thought were changed, some additional tribes that were added that were kind of didn't seem like they made sense in the general scheme. Some of the world is kind of different, stuff like that. Some things that they were a little upset with, but I have none of those hangups. So when I talk about character creation now, understand that I have none of those hangups, so I don't have any issues with anything that was done. So let's get into it. So Werewolf character creation follows the same kind of character creation as H5 and V5. They carry the basic 5th edition World of Darkness character creation stuff, where you essentially will allocate attributes in a certain way, and then you're going to make some choices based on your character, the sort of class and stuff, and then you're going to allocate some skills. But the first thing you want to do is think about the core concept of your character. What are you trying to make? What kind of werewolf are you? And that's your first choice, because once you kind of determine what kind of werewolf you're trying to create, like if you're trying to create a hacker or trying to create a truck driver or some other kind of thing, that'll help you determine where you go with your choices for the rest of it. So like your Auspice and your tribe will be massively affected by the choice that you've made about the concept of your character. Because if you say you want to create a character who's like just a big dumb war machine clawing stuff, and then you choose to be like a Ragabash, which is like the tricksters, then you've made the wrong choice, right? So that's sort of what you do. So then after you have your concept sort of figured out, then you get to choose the Auspice of your character. The Auspice is tied to the moon phase when the werewolf first changed, when they made their first change, and signals sort of the connection they have to Luna, who's Gaia's sister, the moon. And it is based on the moon phase that was going on, and so it makes sense. But these sort of determine kind of the role that the character has in werewolf society and sort of expectations that are put on them, perhaps some of their way of behaving, sort of their mannerisms, and so it does sort of pick apart like sort of the gifts that you have and things like that. So you have to choose your auspice, and it will definitely affect how you determine your attributes and skills later on. But there are 5 in the game. There are 5, which are Ragabash, the tricksters or jovial vampires, werewolves that were born under the new moon, like became werewolves under the new moon. A Theurge, which is the mystic werewolf that was born under the crescent moon. The Philodox, which is the gentle judges and arbiters of the werewolves. They were born under the half moon. The Gilliards, which are the storytellers or lore keeper werewolves, born under the gibbous moon. And then the Harun, the warrior, the raging warrior werewolves born under the full moon. So after you sort of choose that, that's going to lead you down a path for what you kind of want to do. Like if you chose the raging warrior, you're probably going to put points into like the physical attributes and physical skills, right? That's kind of where we're going to go later. But if you chose like the the Theurge, right, the mystic, you're probably going to put points into like mental stuff and occult things. Probably going to have a high willpower, because your gifts are going to be related to those things. So you're probably going to want to have good stat pools for those, right? All right. So then you choose your tribe. And the tribe, in the way that they describe it in the W5 book, is essentially the sort of worldview that you have with other werewolves and the group that you formed based on that. It's not your pack, which are the other players that you're rolling with to like get things done and investigate stuff. This is the bigger sort of group that your character is part of, and their worldview and their mentor spirit and that kind of thing. And there are in fact mentor spirits. Werewolves gain skills and sort of gifts and things from mentor spirits, which are spirits that are from the Umbra that have some kind of power, and they're granting it to the werewolves. So your tribe will dictate your patron spirit and the gifts that you get. It also dictates what are called favors and bans. And a favor is essentially any situation where you're doing kind of what the patron spirit would like you to do or want you to do or would really like to help you in because they have some aptitude in that, so they will help you in that. And then bans are the things that that are negative, that affect you. They're sort of bad situations. They're like either things that you shouldn't do, or if you're in that situation, then the spirit kind of leaves you or whatever, and you don't get sort of gifts. You get some sort of negative consequence that happens to you, and those sort of dictate. That's based on your tribe. But there are 11 tribes in the core book, which I again, like I said, no connection to them at all for me, so I don't care. But some people feel like there should have been more, should have been less. Some shouldn't have existed, but there are 11. The 11 presented are the Black Furies, who oppose injustice and have a reputation for escalating to violence, whose patron spirit is the Gorgon, whose renown is glory. Renown is something that you will use later. We're almost there. We'll get to it in a second. The Bone Nars, who dig up dirts and secrets. Their patron spirit is the Rat, which has the renown of honor. Children of Gaia, they solve enigmas and they focus on the mysteries of the Umbra. Their patron spirit is the Unicorn, which is renown of wisdom. The Gale Stalkers, who live as hunters and trackers. Their patron spirit is the North Wind, who is of honor. The Ghost Council, who seek unconventional approaches and use their rivals' weaknesses against them. Their patron spirit is the Horned Serpent, and their renown is wisdom. The Glasswalkers, who cultivate technology and court the spiders of glass and the concrete that exists within urban landscapes. Sort of workers, they work with workers of the Weaver, of the Triad, right? There's the Wild, the Worm, and the Weaver, and the Worm being the destroyer, whereas the Weaver is the creator, and the Wild sort of the natural. Well, the Weaver is sort of the organizer, right? And then the Wild is sort of the creator spirit. Anyway, the Glasswalkers, their patron spirit is the spider, and they are renowned of wisdom. The Heart Wardens, who cultivate and protect territories, uphold the rights of hospitality and settle abuses thereof. Their patron spirit is the Stag, renowned of glory. The Red Talons, who give their voice to those who lack words and protect the unprotected. Their patron spirit is the Griffin, who is of renown of honor. The Shadow Lords, who believe in might over all things, and weakness is a sign of submission. Their patron spirit is the owl, and their renown is wisdom, thunder. Sorry, wrong one. Their patron spirit is thunder, and it's glory. I skipped ahead somehow. The Silence Riders, the patron spirit is the owl, and their renown is wisdom. But they're the masters of travel who and gather and share information. That's if you were making a truck driver, you would do a Silence Rider. And then there's the Silver Fangs, the inspiring leaders and nobility of werewolf society. Their patron spirit is the falcon, and their renown is honor. So you choose your tribe, and that's going to dictate later some of the gifts that you have, obviously, and who your patron spirit is, obviously, and the renown that you're going to have, obviously. So that's sort of where it goes there, right? So that's a big choice, choosing your tribe. But then you're going to do the allocation of attributes and skills. And it's really easy. The allocation is you're going to have 1 at 4, like of your attributes. You're going to have 1 at 4, 3 at 3, 4 at 2, and 1 at 1. And that's, you're just going to pick. You're just going to go boom, 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 boom. So based on the auspice and the tribe, you're going to go like, all right, I'm going to be doing this kind of thing. I'm a, Ragabash. I'm going to be a face. So I want to put these things into charisma and manipulation. It's the same 9 stats or attributes that you find in any of the World of Darkness games: strength, dexterity, stamina, charisma, manipulation, composure, intelligence, wits, and resolve. Whew, got it. And then the derived stats of health, which is stamina plus 3, and willpower, which is composure plus resolve. That's it. It's just like H5, just like V5. If you're familiar with those games. If you're not, that's it. That's what those are. So that's how you do those. And then for the skills, just like the other two, you will choose whether your character is a jack of all trades, a balanced character, or a specialist, and that will determine how many skills you have at what point. So, like, for example, a specialist has 1 skill at 4, 3 at 3, 3 at 2, and 3 at 1. So you'll have like 10 skills essentially, but one of them will be at 4, and then there'll be sort of less along the way. Whereas the jack of all trades has 1 at 3, 8 at 2, and 10 at 1. So you have a bunch of skills, but just kind of a little bit in all of them. That's sort of how it breaks down. And then usually there's like a specialty and how you apply that. But then you get to choose all the cool background stuff. So after that, you have 7 points to spend into advantages, which they break into merits, which are things like care and access, linguistics, looks, safe house, etc. And then backgrounds, which are things like allies, contacts, fame, mentors, resources, etc. And you kind of get to break that down. And you have to choose 2 points of flaws. So like, for example, like looks has the flaw of like being ugly, right? That's one of them. Mask has a flaw of like being wanted, right? So that's kind of where you'd go on that. So you get to pick 2 points of flaws. And then you get to allocate your renown, which pretends like you're going to allocate a bunch, but you're not. You're essentially going to choose 2. And you're going to have one of them. There's three options, which is fine. You're going to choose 2 of them, and you're going to basically put 2 points of renown into the one that is of your tribe. So, like if you chose the Silence Riders, you're going to put it's the owl, which is wisdom. So you're going to put 2 points into wisdom, and then you'll have 1 point to kind of put wherever you want. You could put it into wisdom, or you can put it into honor or glory, which are the other 2. So honor, glory, honor, and wisdom are the 3 renown, and those are an interesting thing because those are the special system for werewolf. You use renown. They're a way to sort of track your esteem within the werewolf society. They're sort of they're things that you do, like along the way that you do that sort of help gain you these points. Sort of building of your legend as your character is, like you're going to be building your werewolf legend. But certain gifts will require you to make renown rolls. Like, for example, Hare's Leap, which is the ability to jump over walls and, stuff like that. That's strength plus glory. That's the roll you're going to make. And some of the, not just the gifts, but some of the rights will also be, like the rights are renown plus a skill. So, like, for example, the Rite of Tranquility is wisdom plus performance, right? And that helps you reduce your rage by 1. Or the Rite of Abjuration to, like, kick out spirits that are possessing people, that's honor plus occult, and that's a right. So after you figure out your renown, then you get to choose your character's gifts. You're going to get 3. 1 is going to be a native gift, just any werewolf can have it. 1 is going to be an auspice-related gift, and 1 is going to be your tribe gift. The only sort of limitation you have in those is that you have a total renown of 3 because that's where you started. You can only choose gifts that are 3 or below in like total renown. Obviously, you can't choose an auspice gift for a different auspice. Like you can't be a Ragabash and be choosing an Arun, auspice based gift. You just can't. So that's your thing. But it's easy. You have 3 to start off with. So like a character, like for example, Pulse of the Prey. It's a certain level. I think it's 7 or something. You're not going to be able to pull that as a starting character, just not. But Hair's Leap, you will, right? That's fine. Yeah, but it's basically the big list of cool things that you get to do as a werewolf, and it's got rules for how to do them. Essentially, you're gonna pay like a willpower or something. It's gonna take you a certain amount of time. They're much like spells in D&D, right? There's like a time limit, a cost, the roll that goes with it, and then you're probably going to make a rage check to see if you can pull it off beforehand anyway. So that's what it is. It's like a rage check or willpower. That's kind of what it boils down. You're going to cost is going to be rage check or willpower, and then you get to make the cool roll. If you do it, then you do the cool werewolf thing. And then rites are just kind of like special ceremonies that your werewolf knows that help them do things. It's kind of like the gifts, but it's a special ceremony that usually they do with others, maybe by themselves. But yeah, so you get to have one of those as you start, and then you can develop them. You can gain more over time. But the way that those work is for every rite the next rite's going to cost more. So it's like the rite plus, or rite times 3 or something, if I remember correctly. Let me see my notes. It's for attributes, it's new level times 5. Skills are new level times 3. Gifts are new level times 3. I didn't write it down. Okay, well, anyway, it's something like that. And then finally, after you figured out your rights, you then do the thing that you do in all the other games, which is develop your touchstones. I just want to note, this is going to be like the last thing, because this is one of my longest videos. The touchstones in W5 in Werewolf are better than they are in Hunter, kind of similar to the way that they are in Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. So Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition, if you are familiar with that, if anyone's played that, essentially your touchstones don't matter. As long as you have them, as long as you have at least one of them, you're not in permanent despair. So you just need to maintain, like, you have 3 to start out with. You should have 3. You have usually 3 to 5 when you start. You just have to maintain at least one and not let them die, and that's it. There's no other sort of thing that goes along with it. You don't get any benefit from them, no complications, so if you lose them. Whereas in V5, touchstones are related to the character's humanity and linked to the chronicle tenets, their convictions. And so as a mechanical response, they are tied to those things. And if you were to ruin one of your touchstones, you lose track of that chronicle tenet. Vice versa, if you lose track of the tenet, you sort of stymie your connection with that person, which means you can't go to them and gain back like a willpower or that kind of thing, which is something that you can use them for in V5. In Werewolf, they're similar to those things. They aren't really tied to any of the chronicle tenets. There's a different system for judging how well your character is following chronicle tenets, and that's the Hoglosk. And then there's also Hirano, which is the way your character's tracking how well they're sort of sticking to Gaia's plan and like convicted on doing the thing of defending Gaia. So it's different with the touchstones. So in the case of the touchstones here, they're just they're supposed to be non-wolf people, non-supernaturals, that you have connection to. They may be wolf-born people if you decided your character was born wolf, which is a whole separate category of werewolves that didn't start as humans, that became werewolves. They are wolves that became humans. You can have one. The rules say you can have one wolf-born touchstone, but you can't have more than that. If wolf-born you were. If you weren't wolf-born, then you shouldn't have any, essentially what it says. But when you interact with them, you can go to your touchstones and use them. Once per session, you can interact with your touchstone to lower your rage by 1, to heal a point of aggravated willpower damage, which is super cool, or you can remove 1 mark of Harno or Hoglosk. It's the hardest one to say. Harno is wolfy depression. It's sort of whenever you experience major setbacks in the story or the game, or your attempts to stave off the apocalypse, you make a roll with a number of dice equal to both the pools Harno and Hoglosk, and if you fail to beat a difficulty that's set by the GM based on whatever it is, then you gain a Harno. And that's a thing. You can also opt to choose, you can just optionally take a point of Harano to increase your rage to 5 from whatever it is, to 5 for whatever reason you want. That's between you and the rage. Hoglosk is the sort of the feeling that your character has of mercy and compassion, and it's how well your character is connected to the Chronicle tenets, which I think is a bit of a weird one for me, because personally, when you made the Chronicle tenets in the beginning, when you have to get to the end of character creation, creating your touchstones, you work with the rest of the players and you create the Chronicle tenets as a team. That's what the GM has you do. That's what session zeros are for. So you as a group agree to the Chronicle tenets, and then your character may not follow them. And if they don't follow the Chronicle tenets that you helped create, then you take a point of Hoglosk, which I think is very strange. I have a feeling on how that could have been used better, and I'll talk about that in a second. But anyway, you can willingly choose, just like Harano, it works the exact same. If you, if you break a Chronicle tenet, then you make a roll based on the pool of the Harano and the Hoglosk, and if you fail, then you get another Hoglosk. If you succeed, then you don't get anything. Or you can also optionally choose to take a point of Hoglosk to restore all of your willpower. So just all of your willpower damage. So that's probably what you're more likely going to do with it. You're just going to use it like that a lot. So being this is long, I'll sort of skip character development because it's really not that important. And the wolf forms, the different forms of being wolf is kind of cool, but you can look that up online. That hasn't changed from all of the previous editions. It really hasn't changed. There's human form, glabro form, which is the part wolf, part man form. Think Teen Wolf. The Krynos form, which is the war form, the big wolfy scary thing that you see in all the images. The Hispo form, which is the mostly wolf, the dire wolf form. And then the Lupus, which is the full regular wolf form. And then there's Delirium, which goes along with seeing a creature shift. That exists in Werewolf 5th edition. For those of you unfamiliar with that, it just means that if you see someone transform into a werewolf, your mind goes, "What did I just see?" And you make a willpower roll, essentially. And if you succeed, then you're kind of okay. If you fail, then you're not okay, and you kind of forget it later, but you freak out. That's how it goes. And then if you're a player character and you see it, then the GM will the storyteller will kind of go with that. But if it's an NPC, they're just going to freak out and run. That doesn't mean they're not going to shoot and run. Like a cop will probably pull their gun and shoot while they're tactically retreating to their car. So that's a thing, but that is what happens. It's Delirium. Okay. So my final thoughts now that we're near the end of this video. I guess my main thing is that, like I said, I don't really come to the table with any kind of ties to previous editions. So previous editions and me, no thing. Changes that might have been made for this edition, no say, don't care, right? I don't care. So we're focusing only on 5th edition Werewolf here. It's pretty okay. The system wasn't going to fail. It automatically started with the same system that you find in Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition and Vampire the Masquerade 5th edition. And those are both systems I think work. They come from a longer tradition of systems that definitely work. So it was going to work. It wasn't going to be a problem. But there's some things about the system that are not my favorite. The Harano Hoglosk thing is a bit strange to me. I totally understand the ability to to have wolfy depression is kind of a thing. I get that. It's just, it feels subjective to me based on when it's supposed to happen. It doesn't say if you critically fail a roll, you gain Harano. No, it doesn't say that. It just says when you encounter a setback, you experience this Harano thing. So I guess it's based on the storyteller sort of deciding that your character is suffering from some level of super depression, and they've got to make a roll to see if they're catching the feels, right? Which is not great in my opinion. I think what it should have been a different system, and I'll explain in a second. The same thing goes with Hoglosk. The breaking of Chronicle tenets feels to me like it's something that's probably not going to happen that often if the Chronicle tenets were agreed to by everyone, in which case they're really just kind of storyteller pull you back in, kind of keep you reeled in sort of situations, in which case Sure, I guess that might be necessary for tables, but realistically, if you have a good group of players, you're never going to encounter that Hoglask, and therefore you're never going to have them rolling Hoglask, which means they're only ever going to gain it from trying to, up their rage as necessary through the story, which is fine. But you didn't need to make it like that. There could have been a different balancing system, which I'll get into in just now, I guess. So my feeling with the way that the rage sort of works out is that the fact that it sort of replaces dice in your pool kind of feels to me different. So I understand why it was done that way for Vampire, right? Vampire, you are always hungry, and the more you don't feed, the more hungry you get, and the more likely you are to critically fail on rolls because you are hungry and the blood is not flowing and that kind of stuff. Makes sense. But in Werewolf, you want rage. You want to have rage. You're going to go out. You're going to howl at the moon when you first wake up. You're going to do things to gain rage because you want it. You want to use it. But it's like punishing the players for having more rage. The more rage they have, the more likely they are to critically fail at normal things like driving a car or, just talking to someone. It sort of feels weird to be punishing the players for trying to maximize their ability to do werewolfy things. I want to maximize my feelings or my werewolfiness. Therefore, I'm failing more often. Seems very strange to me because the critical failure sort of creates this brutal outcome where unless you were attempting to cause grievous bodily harm, then you cause grievous bodily harm. Now, if that's what you were going for, then great, you did it. Success, you caused grievous bodily harm. But if you're trying to drive a car and then all of a sudden you just rip the steering wheel off, you just really complicated your life in a very major way that doesn't make any sense because you're just trying to drive your car down the street. It feels a little bit too much that it pulls the agency out of the player's hands. Because there are things that happen to your character that increase their rage that are not choices that you made. They're just things that happen. They increase the rage. So that's kind of a thing. But my personal opinion is the system could have worked a little bit better if the rage dice had been used very similar to the way that desperation dice are used in Hunter the Reckoning 5th edition, in that they were additional dice added on to the dice pool for the character. Now, the way you'd play that is much like you would sort of balance them out with the auspices and be like, all right, so your rage, this is how I would do it. Essentially, I would have the rage dice apply whenever you're doing any of the wolf gift things. So instead of renown, right, it would just be rage dice plus whatever, right? And so you'd have it like that, and then you have then you'd also have it maybe tied to the auspice. Whenever you're doing this thing, like if you're playing a Ragabash and you're doing some jovial face work thing, then you're going to add the rage to it. So then that's just out there, and it does increase the chances of critical failing stuff that you're super good at or the wolfy stuff that you're trying to do, but it doesn't really affect when you're trying to read in the library, right? But then you have this Harno Hoglask thing where you can instead use that to balance that out, right? So every time you critically fail, then maybe you gain a point of, instead of just having a brutal outcome where something bad happens, instead you gain Harno, right? That's the thing. Or Hoglask, however you want to play it. The Hoglask, the fanaticism, the wolfy fanaticism, so you gain some Hoglask whenever you have a brutal outcome. Great. And then you have to interact with your touchstones to get rid of it. And then, sort of conversely, when you have total failures, right, where you have no dice that make any failures or any successes, then you gain Harno. That's how I would play that system. So, I don't know, that's kind of how I feel about that. It should have been a little bit different, in my opinion, but it's fine. It is what it is. It just feels like punishing the players for having rage that you want them to have because they need it for everything that they do. So yeah, so I would give it, essentially I'm going to give it 1.75 thumbs because, it's a World of Darkness game. You can't go wrong picking this game. But it's, especially one that is less of an emphasis on political power struggles, right? It's 1.75. Political power struggles like the Werewolf games, and it doesn't have the sort of super bleak outcome from a Hunter game where Hunter, you're going to die. That's how it goes. It sort of grants you that sort of balance between political and going full rampage on some corrupt spirits. So It's a 1.75. I think if you play it, you're gonna have fun. I think that once you get past some of the twisty turniness with like the shape shifting and the Haruno and the Hoglask, then you'll be fine. I think hopefully if you watch this video, you feel like you have a stronger understanding of what's going on. So I recommend you go out and play this game and have a good time enjoying it. So yeah, good gaming. I'll talk to you all later.